So yeah, we can go through these questions, and then I can interject and stuff too, obviously.
Absolutely.
I think we both have some shared experiences.
Yes, yes.
I guess first off, like, how long have you been investing, and what got you interested in it?
All righty.
The origin stories.
Yeah. Long time. Actually, started part-time. Had a corporate job, and so I, for a number of years, was part-time, and then since 2007, full-time.
So when you were part-time, did you have someone that kind of teach you early on, or were you just kind of
I
finding classes and stuff to learn?
When I was part-time, it was a lot of learn by doing.
Yeah, that's good.
Particularly on, we were buying properties as buy and hold properties at that point, and I was doing my own rehabbing, and so there was a lot of trial and error.
As in, like, with a crew, or were you completely solo?
No, I was completely solo.
Wow.
Had a little bit of construction experience, but not a ton, and so made a lot of mistakes. Took a lot longer than it should, but even today I still use that, fall back on that experience, because even though I just use an example like sheetrocking, it's been a number of years since I've done that, but I know what's involved.
Yeah.
And I can appreciate what contractors are going through, and that's pretty much true of, electrical or plumbing or carpentry or whatnot. If you at least have done it, maybe not efficiently.
Yeah, you don't need to be that master.
Yeah,
but,
exactly. Yeah.
So what shifted in 2007?
I had an early retirement from corporate life opportunity, and I came very, very close a number of times to resigning and doing real estate full time, because that was my love and passion.
Awesome.
But they kept sweetening the pot and enticing me to stay and that kind of thing. But finally, the time was right in 2007, so we had an agreement. I stayed on as a consultant, but basically all that meant was they could call me if they had questions, and I could do real estate full time. So,
was there some things in your job that kind of carried over, you think, to investing that helped?
Yeah, good question. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Not specific to real estate, but from a people standpoint, I ran factories and dealt with a lot of human resource, people related experiences. So so absolutely it carried over. Yeah. Yeah.
So is there certain types of investments? I know you mentioned the rent and holds early on.
Right.
I know we've obviously been after some flips together and stuff.
Yep.
So you started with rent and hold. When did you start flipping, or was it all kind of intermingled, I guess?
It was intermingled. They start with buy and hold, and then there were some opportunities that presented itself that were flips, and so we did a condo conversion. It was a 6-unit, converted it to rehabbed it, converted to condos. Did a motel, rehabbed it and put a manager in. This was on Cape Cod, actually, and we changed it from a seasonal motel to a year-round motel, and got the earnings up, and with the idea of flipping it. So it was a flip right from the start. So was the condo project, and then we did some new construction where we were hiring builders to basically do that. So combination of flips, some commercial, and buy and hold. Yeah.
Do you have a preference for which one you enjoy doing the most, or that you found the most consistent returns on, maybe?
I think the buy and hold strategy is a super strategy, but it also has a shelf life, because once you reach a certain age, you know, it doesn't really fit anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess the thing that I enjoy the most are the flips. You know, the before and afters. You
Transformation.
know,
right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So a big part of real estate investing is just finding the funding source. There's obviously a lot of traditional ways. There's
Right.
a lot of creative ways. You can sign in cash if you have it.
Absolutely.
What was kind of your early day funding strategies, and what have they developed into over the years?
Again, I think it's a great question, and probably the number one thing that either holds back or totally stops new investors. You know,
Yeah.
It's scary, and depending on their strength or lack of strength financially, it just can be a total barrier.
Yep.
So for me personally, early on, I was still, had a corporate job, and so my borrowing strength was pretty strong, and so I was dealing with banks initially.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with banks is that sometimes it just take too long, and you need to close quickly, and they can't do that, and you end up losing the deal. So that kind of leads you to alternate sources that can close sooner. So personally, and this takes time, and it takes building trust and respect.
Yeah.
But over time, in my case, I built up a series of private lenders, and that is I still use that today.
Mm-hmm.
And so we try to obviously have more than one, so I have a number of them. I treat them well, they treat me well, and no matter what happens on a deal, whether you want to make money on every deal, but my experience is if you do enough of these, you're going to have one or two that go the other way.
Yeah.
And the rule of thumb is the private lender always gets paid.
Yep.
Even if you have to reach in your own pocket, because one bad experience that a private lender will have, that can spread like wildfire. So
Yep.
you want to treat them like they are, treat them like gold.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are other alternatives. You mentioned that, if someone has the ready cash,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Well, in real estate too, there's always that competitiveness with other buyers.
Yes.
So, if you're using an FHA loan, it might be great for your wallet and your situation. But if you're up against a cash offer with no inspections,
Exactly
you're
right.
going to lose every time. So.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So if you have the cash, that's one alternative. Or if you have enough for a down payment, and you're going to get a lower interest rate with a lending institution, that's good too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of investors that are starting out have to go through the pain of not a private lender, but a hard money lender, and that can be brutal.
Yeah.
High interest rate, oftentimes a number of points,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes payments, inspections, and that kind of thing. So
Yep.
it's not, if that's the only alternative and the numbers work, that's fine.
Yeah.
And it's a place to start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I know that's probably one of the most common questions I get from people who are just interested in it. It's
Yeah.
kind of, where do I start? And I
Yeah.
always say, do you have the money? Or do you know where to get the money?
Right.
Because you can have all the desire in the world, and you can find a great property, but if you don't know how to finance it or even get to an accepted offer, then
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest holdups.
Yeah, and I think related to that is the fact that for a newer investor, if they can partner or establish a relationship with an established investor,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of good things happen because
Yeah.
the learning curve is a lot quicker. the experienced investor may have contacts that a new investor doesn't have. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's great. I mean, when I met you, I didn't know much about real estate investing at all. What helped me, though, is I kind of brought something to the table, too. I was a licensed realtor. I could take you on appointments. I could do photo and video for you. So if you have something to bring to the table, even if it's like a little thing, I think that helps.
That's an excellent point. You've certainly done that, and you're a quick learner. And if I said
bamboozled you to come here, so
as I said to you before, that initially you were like a sponge when we were looking at properties, and now you're a contributor, and the more eyes that you have looking at things, the better.
Yeah, I agree.
So my compliments to you.
Thank you. Yeah, had some good teachers for sure. And I think a team is hugely important in the process that we've developed, and you've obviously developed. I think a big contributor to the success that you've had and the recent successes we've had on properties and stuff. So, I don't think a mentor and a good team can be understated. I think that's really important.
Yeah, when you think about from an investing standpoint, what are the numbers have to work.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've seen repeatedly with new investors is that they want it so bad that they start to force the numbers to work.
Yep.
And with you being an experienced agent, specifically one of the things you bring to the party is the after repair value assessment, and that's absolutely critical.
Yeah.
I'd say that's the number one mistake that I see investors make, is that they let their enthusiasm, influence the after repair value, and it's a critical mistake because they may not be able to recover from it.
Yeah.
The other side of the coin is the repair estimate, and that is equally difficult for a new investor, and that's why recently what we've been doing is having one of the general contractors come with us.
Yep.
And even though an experienced investor can come up with his own repair estimate, prices are changing, availability is changing, we had supply chain issues, and the contractors are dealing with this every day.
Yep.
And particularly if they're going to do the work, it's their quote right up front.
Yeah.
And so the thing that's worked very well for you and I is that we walk out of there, brainstorm it a little bit,
Yep.
and we're walking out of there with a repair estimate.
Yeah, and a very good idea of the range we can offer in, and the range of potential profit, I think, on the deal. So, then we could submit an offer that night, which,
Exactly.
Absolute game changer. You mentioned earlier, starting out, you had some good ones, had some bad ones. Is there like a particular bad one that you've had in your mind, like that sticks out as like?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then same thing for the best deal you ever done, and kind of what you learned from each of those.
Well, which one do you want?
Let's start with the bad. We can end on a good note.
This one was a terrible one.
Yeah.
So everybody, or most everybody that has been in this real estate arena for any length of time has either remembers or has heard about 2008.
Yep.
And you had the financial crash and the associated real estate crash, and I was doing a waterfront property, that I had bought for just shy of $1 million, and was going to put about 60 or 70 grand into the rehab, and the ARV was to be 1.4 million. So started out to be pretty sweet.
Yeah, numbers made sense.
Pretty sweet deal.
Yeah.
And we did what I think was a really good job on the rehab. It was a beautiful house, water in the backyard, 40-foot dock, the whole schmear,
Yeah.
And
Beautiful.
then the financial crash occurred, and it was impossible for buyers to get a jumbo mortgage, And the property sat and sat and sat for multiple years.
Holding costs added up, yeah.
And so I had private lenders, but they were, the interest rate was pretty steep. Never the intent to go,
that long.
That long.
What did you have in mind for hold period?
The rehab was a 3-month rehab, and prior to the financial crisis, with that type of waterfront and whatnot, I mean,
desirable, yeah.
A matter of weeks to get it under contract, So the total time estimate was 6 months, and didn't happen. So multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars lost.
Wow.
Yeah. So no matter how successful you are, those hurt.
Yeah. So what was the biggest, learning experience you think from that was, be prepared for unpredictable market shifts? Or
Yeah, watch the market very, very closely.
Yeah.
The other thing that I learned from that is that when you do have a market shift, it's the vacation properties that are most vulnerable. Yeah. And back in 2008, Florida was hit very, very hard.
Yep.
Any of the resorts right up the coast.
Yep.
And in this case it was Cape Cod again, and it was they were hit extremely hard. Yep. And so I mentioned the jumbo mortgages. So the lower priced properties that didn't require a jumbo mortgage weren't affected nearly as much. But the higher end stuff, so it's kind of like high reward, high risk.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of course corrections that I made. I made up my mind at that point that I was going to, over time, remove myself from a seasonal, vacational type investments. Okay. Number one. Number two, that I was going to be very, very cautious about very, very high-end properties.
Yep.
Because the carrying cost is just terrible. So one of the reasons that over time, from 2008 to probably 2012, 13, I started selling off properties in vacation areas. We had about 12 vacation rentals. Did very well on them, but and there were times where the appreciation was like 3% per month.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. And so the appreciation game was great when you're on the upside.
Yep.
When you're on the downside, it's not a lot of fun. So, I always describe the vacation areas as kind of like a sinusoidal curve where it's a roller coaster over time, and you're going to hit those cycles. As compared and contrast to the Capital District area here in New York, kind of steady eddy.
Yeah.
And in fact, I used to call it steady eddy, but it's still steady eddy, but with a steeper positive slope than it used to be.
Yeah.
And so you don't get those big swings. So even if the market is cycles, which it always does, it's not the huge hits that you can get. Yeah. So that was definitely the worst one.
What do you think contributes to like the Capital Region's stability?
That is a great question, and I'm sure you have your own opinion on that. So let's just kind of, like you and I do when we're walking through houses, let's just brainstorm that a little bit, chime in here. But there's a number of things in my mind. I mean, one of the things is the capital in New York.
Yeah.
And that garners an awful lot of employment and a steadiness. You pick one. What's another one?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say definitely the political presence and the state jobs available.
Yeah.
You talk about, mitigating risk and having a large, government presence it's the best back security you can have in the U.S. anyway. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's a big contributor.
Yeah.
I think New York in general, but definitely this area is good for colleges.
Yep.
Any of the major cities kind of you go to around here, whether it's Schenectady, Troy, or Albany, they've all got pretty prestigious schools.
Absolutely.
So just for a rental aspect, I think that contributes quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then there's quite a bit of, local industry, bigger, job providers out there too. Yeah.
Who would have ever thought that people would, in the high-tech fields, would be transferring from Austin, Texas to Albany, New York?
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. It's amazing. And, the nanotechnology and whatnot is huge. Global foundries, with the chip manufacturing, and now they're going to build another plant,
Yeah.
Again, are all strong, positive influences. New York State is not known for being, the investment capital of the world by any means, But by the same token, if you compare the Albany area to some of the other areas in New York State, not to belittle any of the other areas, but I think the steady Eddie type of thing with good steady growth is probably more true in the Capital District than the other cities in New York.
I would agree, yeah. And then just another company off the top of my head, Regeneron, was a newer company in the area was doing well before COVID, and then that national spotlight, I think, definitely did wonders for them.
Plug Power is done well. So it's a lot of good things going. Yeah.
And then just circling back, so we talked about your worst deal. What was like the best deal that you dream about, everyone?
Well, there have been other deals, individual deals that I made more money on, but probably the best experience, believe it or not, was my first one.
Really? That's amazing.
Yeah. So
it gives us hope, Dan.
and the reason that I have such fond memories of that is that, well, let me explain. So bought a duplex, and this was on Cape Cod as well. Needed a rehabbed it, did my own work and everything, and those were back in the days where I was still working, so that I could get bank loans. So I got it was funded through a bank. Did the rehab. It was a good, strong appreciation period of time, and so when I finished the rehab, we were renting it, getting income, good income, and so I was able to refinance it. So with the money that I cash out refinance, that one property then spawned two, so I could buy two. So now I had three. All right. Then some time went by. I upgraded that first property even some more and refinanced it a second time, and that spawned two more. So one became five. Wow. And we did that another time after that. So that was kind of like the mother property that generated a bunch of kids.
Wow. That's a great story.
Yeah, so that was
Yeah.
And that really got us started, and also you're establishing a track record during the same time. So then it kind of sets the stage for private lending.
Yeah. And then just to talk about the refinancing a little bit, why I think it's such a powerful tool is because you get to hold on to the asset,
right? And
then you get to pull your money out tax free, I believe, right?
Yes. It's tax deferred.
Okay.
Tax deferred, but still a good strategy.
Yep.
So your basis of the property can change, but the fact that you refi is not a taxable event.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome, and I know, there's a lot of challenges when people get in early. So to hear that your first deal, spawned a bunch, and Probably got you pretty excited about the prospect of,
It did.
doing that in the long term.
It did. I've taught and talked to a lot of new investors. That is highly unusual.
Yep.
It's probably more dumb luck than anything else, but the risk of when new investors are on their own, the risk is very great of not having a good experience.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of investors, even that have gone through national education programs, spent a lot of money, and do their first investment, lose a lot of money, and they're done at that point. It happens way too often, and I feel badly for those folks, because it didn't necessarily have to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. All right, well, just about wrapping up here. This has been awesome. This is kind of a unique question, but is there a certain strategy, tool, or software that you use, that's like a game changer for you, that you couldn't live without to kind of accomplish what you've accomplished and on a daily basis do what you do? Like for me, the Flex MLS or the MLS system, that's probably my number one tool just for as a realtor, but it definitely helps for.
No question. Having the MLS as a tool is critical,
yep.
Particularly in establishing that critical ARV number.
Yep.
So that is great. One of the things that one of my students and I developed was, and I've shared it with you, the deal analyzer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a kind of a quick and dirty way to input the critical factors like ARV and repair costs, and purchase costs, and taxes and duration and that kind of thing,
mm-hmm.
and get, the output of that is a fairly good number, not 100%, but a fairly good number in terms of projecting profit and determining whether it's a deal or no deal. I think you've experienced the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are other more sophisticated tools. For years, I use an Excel sheet, which is kind of like a more detailed version of the deal analyzer.
Yep.
So, what that does is model. It's kind of like begin with the end in mind. So, what am I going to sell it for? What am all the selling costs associated with selling it? Whether it's a real estate commission or
mm-hmm.
or attorney fees or that kind of thing. Okay.
Yep.
So you're establishing a net sales. This is before you even buy it, before you close. You're modeling the transaction.
Yep.
So you're establishing determining a net sales, and then you're modeling the same thing for the purchase price, and then the same thing for all your carrying costs, including repair costs,
mm-hmm.
and you're projecting a profit, and then you're also projecting cash flow, which is two different things.
It is, yeah.
And so I personally use that in Excel, and then like any Excel thing, you can run. It's very easy to just run scenarios and
mm-hmm.
play what if games.
Yep.
What if, what if the ARV is less?
Yeah. Market shifts.
What if the ARV is more? What if my repair costs are this? Or you can get excuse my French, I call them oh shit calls, but you can get an oh shit call from your contractor. What's an oh shit call? It was, I'll give you an example. Tyrone, who you know well now,
mm-hmm.
On one rehab we were doing, the phone rang, and I could just tell by his voice it wasn't good news. And he said, "Gee, I opened up that wall that we're going to open up, and we've got mold." All right,
mm-hmm.
not in the budget.
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to cost? And how long is it going to delay us? Well, we got that out of the way, and about 10 minutes later, he called me back, said, "And we have carpenter ants."
Oh.
So those are things that are not in the budget, but then you can take your Excel sheet and say, well, the repair cost just went up X, and my profit just went down Y, and at least you know where you stand.
Yeah, and see maybe when you take away a little from somewhere else and, you know, redistribute the budget for it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
good point.
All right, cool. Just concluding, last question here. Obviously, the market is pretty hot right now for listing homes anyway. Very much a favorable seller's market.
Yeah, despite all the doom and gloom.
All the recession.
Was it Mark Twain that said, you know, the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated?
Yeah, I mean, it was after coming off that really hot market. There was a bit of a lull.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a very much, it's going to crash. Everything's going to fall apart.
Right.
And then they jack the rates up. They think that's going to kind of balance it out. And what do you know? It's right back to a crazy hot market. And just for a current example, I just had a listing go up Monday. This is in Clifton Park.
Yeah.
Multiple offers. Deadline is Thursday. And, you know, 40,000 over asking price. So, it's real, it's legit. And do you foresee that continuing? It's always difficult to project.
It is. It is.
But it's a question I get a lot: is, you know, is it a good time to buy? Is it a good time to sell?
So, what you just described is 100% accurate. The current market in the Capital District.
Yeah.
It is not the same in all parts of the country.
Yep. Yeah, that's very true.
And so it goes back to the, you know, you hear on the national news and whatnot, you know, lots of discussions on real estate, and it's from a national perspective. You know, real estate is a local market and a local business. And so you can be having terrible things going on in one area and good things going on in the other. And in my opinion, it goes back to our earlier discussion on the demographics of the Capital District.
Yeah.
You know, what's driving these things? Well, one of the things that's driving the strong market right now is low inventory.
Yeah.
But also all those other demographic things that we talked about. You know, the education, the capital, you know, being in the capital, the industry and everything, you know, all those things are supporting that. Yeah.
And just for an example, for like the local market concentration, like during COVID, people were running out of this New York City, just downstate, to come live up here.
Yes.
Because, you know, just because of COVID risk there.
Right.
But also the fact that, you know, maybe I don't need to go to work in every day, or I can work remotely. So why not move up here where you get more for your dollar?
Right.
Get a, you know, and a bigger piece of land, bigger piece of property.
Exactly. So let's give an example in our local market.
Yep.
Where it's not good. Office space.
Office space. Yeah, very true.
Office space. You know, there's a lot of vacant space. You see a lot of people converting former office space to apartments now. I was faced with that on I bought a property in Troy, there was a main house and there was an adjacent doctor's office. And I was going to just do a quick refresh on the doctor's office, put it right back on the market. COVID hit, and the office, you know, the market for office space just was terrible. So, we literally stopped the rehab, focused on the main house, did the rehab, sold that, and then decided that the strategy was not a good one for the office, and so we decided to make that into a residential building, and so we put a second story on, and we just got the electrical inspection passed today. So, so plumbing is done, electrical is done, and now we're into the insulation and sheetrock and the final stages.
Yeah.
But it would have been, it was painful to do that, but we were able to borrow money from private lenders and get it reappraised as a residence. And so hopefully it'll work out good. But if we hadn't have done that, I know we would have been sitting on it.
Yeah. And I think I've seen a shift too as far as office, and I think it helps with all the tools out there now. People can work from home,
Yes.
even run their own businesses from home.
Yes.
Where those big offices are getting turned into executive suites or smaller units where
Right.
someone running their, their passion business or something can, at an affordable cost, go have a space to
Yes.
work on it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely true.
All right, that's all I got.
All righty.
Thanks for coming on.
Hey, my pleasure.
Come on the show.
my
Yeah.
pleasure.
But yeah, we ripped through pretty much everything
Awesome.
on here, and ended up jumping around just on, as we kind of talked. But
Yeah.
is there anything else you want to discuss, or any questions for myself?
I guess I was thinking driving over here, that you might ask me that,
Yeah.
And there's, I always have a soft spot for new investors that are just starting out.
Yep.
And, one of the questions might be, well, what advice would you give them?
Yeah.
Is that an appropriate question?
That was on here. I know we touched on it a little, just
Yeah.
about the funding aspect of
Right,
it, but
right.
but yeah, definitely. So yeah, what would you say about that?
So, I've given this a lot of thought, and I've been a coach and had students and whatnot, and the thing that frustrates me the most is to have new people. There are organizations nationally that are great on education.
Mm-hmm.
They're also very expensive. Ask me how I know, because I've been a part of several and spent a lot of money on education. What I find particularly true more recently when I had my own students is that you can get all the education, and you think you know it, and then you go to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and oh my God.
Yep.
There's a gap between the doing and the education, and that gap can be fatal.
Yep.
And so, if someone was to ask me, well, what do you do to avoid that? And I would say to do what you've done, and that's to partner or attempt to partner with someone that has experience, that can shorten the learning curve and get you into a point where you're learning by doing, not just an education standpoint.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. The experience versus education, I think, is super.
Yes.
It's just like you go to college to learn about, nanoscience, and then is it anything like what you actually are doing?
Exactly.
Yeah. So.
Exactly. So I think that would be one thing that I think is important.
Yep.
Related to that is this business, the investment side of the business is not for the faint of heart.
Mm-hmm.
And you watch the shows on TV, the HGTV, and all those spin-offs, and it looks very easy.
Yep.
And fun and exciting and whatnot, and it is.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, and it could sink you if you do it wrong, for sure.
Absolutely. There's the market knowledge and as we said before, determining the ARV is critical.
Mm-hmm.
The funding critical, and knowing how to establish relationships with private lenders and how all that works.
Yep.
Is critical knowledge. But then doing the rehab, selecting the wrong contractor, I've seen some people that had absolutely no knowledge of rehabbing, and they were taken advantage of,
Mm-hmm.
and so there is a lot of moving parts, and not for the faint of heart. And
Yeah.
and so you just, I guess I would sum it up is that people's risk tolerance is different.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a very low risk tolerance, this probably isn't a business.
Yeah.
You know, by the same token, a very high risk tolerance can get you in trouble.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, that would be maybe a couple of additional items.
I know the common phrase, paralysis by analysis.
Yes.
I know that early on for me, especially, even just toying around with the idea.
Right.
You think, you finally found a property, and then you just stare at it way too long, and then talk yourself out of it almost.
There's not a single deal that I've ever done or that I couldn't find a reason not to do it.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice, though.
Yeah.
You got to take the leap eventually, and
Yeah.
I think, like you were saying, having someone by your side that can at least tell you
Right.
if they think it's a good idea to take the leap or not.
It's like the old saying, if all you have is a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail.
Yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, I had a call from a student that I've done deals with.
Mm-hmm.
He'll remain nameless, but he still falls into the trap of getting excited over a deal, and because inventory is tight,
Mm-hmm.
deals are hard to find, that you start to force it.
Yeah.
And it's probably one of the worst mistakes that you can make.
Yeah.
And so you have to be willing to walk away. And it's easier to walk away if you have multiple opportunities, but if you only have one, that's tough.
Yeah.
You know, and we had Tony and I looked at a property that came through a wholesaler last week. Very interesting property, 6 acres of land.
Mm-hmm.
The house reminded me of a camp, but it had like 6 or 7 bedrooms, and it was all spread out and kind of lousy curb appeal and whatnot. And you know, the first instinct is, boy, we could do this, and we could do that, we could do this, and we could do that. But as you heard me say, I've lived in Alabama for 6 years, so I've picked up a little bit I still remember some of the southern sayings.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, again, excuse my French, is you can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. And I think that's what we are attempting to do in this house, that it just didn't have...
quite the right layout, bones.
Yeah. And even if you really did all those good things, you know, that we would do, it may not work out. And
Mm-hmm.
then how do you appraise something like that?
Yeah.
You know, it was one of a kind.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, I had a number in mind, but you know, the variability of that number, that would be very difficult to run comps. So.
I think that's actually...
So we walked away.
Yeah. An important point, too, though, is you don't need to make the best property that ever existed, you know. Live off the comps, try to find similar stuff, replicate the styles. Don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just got to copy and paste almost of what worked and how can you replicate it.
Yeah, those are the best. I call them singles and doubles.
Yep.
You know, you can make a decent profit, but by the same token, you know, the home runs are nice, but they usually come with a degree of risk.
Yep.
You know, and as I said on this property, I was just talking about it. If it was a standard ranch
Mm-hmm.
or a standard colonial, I wouldn't have hesitated. But really squirrely layout, you know, just so.
Yeah, no, that uniqueness can, I think, hurt. You pigeonhole your prospective buyers when you do something like that.
Absolutely, your buyer pool shrinks down, and I've made that mistake, and it's not fun. Usually, it results in much longer holding time than you expected.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all great stuff. I think definitely what helped me, I mentioned it earlier, just adding some sort of value for you. I don't want people to, you know, call you up and say, please just let me, walk around with you or something. I think it's important there's so many different ways in real estate, micro industries within it that you could focus on.
Right.
Whether that's, inspecting homes, being a realtor,
right,
doing just photos, doing video. There's so many ways in the door, I think. Staging,
yes,
all you got to do is find one of those I think you really enjoy, and then that can lead to kind of greater experiences.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And to try to learn it all at once, it's
overwhelming, yeah.
It is overwhelming, and
it's too much to learn.
It is too much to learn. And I, going forward, like you and I are we will be doing projects together. There's no doubt in my mind, and we're both bringing plenty to the table. What I have stopped doing is to get involved with people that know absolutely nothing. Yep. I mean, I enjoy that. I enjoy the coaching aspect, but to be honest with you, I just don't have the time.
Yep.
And there's higher and better use of my time. So
yep.
It sounds like a mean thing, but
no, I think that's important though, and I wouldn't want to waste your time or anybody's time that I feel like I wasn't helping them in some way.
Yeah.
So you got to make it advantageous for everybody involved.
And if you've seen me partner with contractors, and so they're bringing plenty to the table.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And in fact, the property that I was just referring to that I looked at with a contractor, what we brainstormed, we decided not to go ahead, but what we brainstormed was that we would partner on the project, so that he would do the contracting portion at cost. And then we would, divvy up the profit accordingly. Yep. So it's a way that, we're each bringing significant contributions to the project.
Yeah, and I think the more partnerships or different collaborations you can have, I think it helps your end profit at the end of the day too,
Yes.
If you can lower original costs, that just means you can be more competitive with your offers.
Yes.
Which I think helps when we go on our group tours with everybody, and we're all invested in it, and everyone makes a profit together. Yeah. Then we can. And
the beauty part about it is, it's the old teamwork or collaboration thing, where there's typically at least three of us. You being. And we're wearing multiple hats when we go through, but the primary hat is you as the agent, yep. Me as the real estate guy, investor, and then the contractor. Yep. So you have your core expertises, but then I think the most positive thing that I think that's accomplished, and I think that this applies to anything.
Yeah.
But I call it a mastermind. So when we're walking through the properties, it's a mastermind. Yep. There's no ego involved. We're throwing out ideas, and the objective is to come up with the best solution. Yep. And I'm sure you heard this before, but the results of a mastermind, if there's three people involved, it's not 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. The output is valued at multiples of the 3. Yep. So it's probably 15. Yeah. It's probably 30, because you may have an idea that would spawn another idea from the contractor, which would spawn an idea from me, and there you go.
No, there's been, I think, countless times when we're just talking, and all of a sudden that'll bring up another point that we forgot to address, or that might save us a lot of money in a certain area,
And how many times recently? Yeah. How many times that we've gone thumbs down on the deal? And so we've talked about this. Sometimes the best deals you'll ever do are the ones you don't buy. Yeah,
I know. We pass on plenty, but I don't have any regrets about any of the ones we've passed on. So
no.
Yeah. So what would you like? Because I introduce you to people all the time, new people and stuff. What is your title? I'd say project manager. I think someone thought you were the property manager when I said that once, and I was like, well, that doesn't accomplish much, but
I don't know. Jack all trades, master of none.
Captain Dan.
Yeah. I was never much on titles anyway, but I guess if I, in the case where we're representing an investor, I guess project manager is probably the best we can do,
Yeah, because I think I just bestowed that on you without even checking, so I wanted to be sure. But
no, that's fine, and the term real estate investor, as well as real estate agent, as well as attorneys, strike people in different ways depending on their experience and who they know.
Yeah.
And so they're somebody for a while I didn't like the term flips, and I really still don't. But it's used so commonly that I think that. But originally it had a kind of a negative connotation,
Yeah, put a face on a crap building or something.
Yeah. Do a lousy job, hide stuff, all those negative kind of, and they're out there. There's bad apples out there.
Well, I show to a lot of people looking to buy their home for the next 30 years. So, and I've seen bad flips and I've seen great flips. It's never, I always check the history of the property. If it's getting sold every year, there might be a reason for that. But even if, someone bought it and flipped it in 6 months or something, doesn't necessarily mean that it's still worth that original value, It all depends on the quality of work at the end of the day. But,
I mean, one of the things that I think have worked out really well is, we arrive at a property, we'll take a quick walk around the outside to see if there's any indicators of problems.
Yep.
And 9 times out of 10, where do we go first?
Yeah, downstairs in the
down
basement.
in the basement.
Yep.
And oftentimes that's the
Yeah.
we can rule things out without spending a lot of time.
Yeah. That's probably a question I get a lot too, is like, what are the most common issues on places? Like, what should I avoid? And honestly, I stole the answer from you is, the main issues are going to be in the basement, but, every deal is different with how it works.
Right.
If you can buy a property for $1, but it's going to be worth $300 at the end of the day, you can obviously allow for a lot more work.
Right.
But, if you need something, at cost, turnkey, no work needed, then that's your budget. But
Exactly. Yeah, there's one of the terms I use from time to time is, if a house is in really bad shape, is, would you take it if they gave it to you?
Yeah.
In some cases the answer is no.
Yeah.
And but in cases where the answer is yes, then at what cost and whatnot. And in so many cases, and you and I have experienced this together, it's kind of begin with the end in mind. You kind of back into what you can afford to pay for it, and putting negotiating aside. I mean, that's your. I think the term is MAO, maximum allowable offer, and you got to stick to that.
Yep. Yeah, and I think some of those deals that you do pass on because they couldn't give it to you. I think a lot of ones I've seen is when they address problems incorrectly, when you have to undo their correction and then re-correct it, because in their mind, I think it inflates what should be done, but really it's just made it completely worse. So
you and I have already seen some, and this is not a new phenomenon. You'll see rehabs partially done, and you and I had a pleasant experience on one where the workmanship was outstanding, but more than not, you get into situations where either the workmanship is not great, or you really don't know exactly what was done and was it done properly, particularly if walls are already sheetrock you can't see. So again, those are all higher risk issues that you have to allow for, And back on the markets, we've seen a number of those, and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we got a good process altogether where you can never see everything. You can't rip open the walls. You can, sometimes you get in the attics right away, or there's always going to be some risks and some things that are going to be unknowns. But
And that the thing that we've been doing on behalf of one investor is serving as his boots on the ground. And advising him whether to buy or not to buy and what the numbers are. The one thing we should have touched on was the criteria for a buy and hold is quite different than a criteria for a flip.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
And in a flip, you're dealing with the short term, you're in and you're out, and you got to make a profit. Where on a buy and hold, you could possibly afford to pay quite a bit more, and achieve the cash flow benefits over time.
Yep.
Totally different criteria.
Yeah, no, that's definitely important when they're completely different things, really.
They are.
I think flips are probably the most popular just because of the national news on it.
Right.
But for me, flips are obviously great. You're in and out, but if you want to, hold on to properties and ride that appreciation wave, then you can only do that by.
You know what the best strategy is, I think?
What's that?
Do both.
Do both, yeah.
Have, particularly, if you're younger and you have time to experience the appreciation over time, and having the cash flow continue to go up, the rents go up, debt service goes down, those kinds of things. So I know one person, described this to me years and years ago. It's almost like a habit.
Yeah.
So your passive income, and it's almost like having a pension, comes from the buy and holds.
Yeah.
And that's your wealth building strategy. Your flips are generating the cash to do the wealth building strategy. So
it's a great way to look at it.
So I think that the general this is not always true, but a general rule of thumb: for every 2 flips that you do, you ought to be able to at least buy 1 buy and hold.
Yeah. I think that's important when analyzing properties too, to look at it in different lenses, to have different exit strategies if needed.
Absolutely.
So we do that for our client because it helps the long-term risk of, if he had to sell this tomorrow, how would that look? If he had to hold it for 30 years and sell it, how would it look then? So
so we described 2 strategies, the wealth building strategy and the cash building strategy. So there's a way to link those 2 together that is extremely powerful, and the people that have done this successfully, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So what they would do is so let's start very basically. So somebody has a buy and hold, and they do a flip, and they take the money from the flip, and they buy another flip, all right, and they take the combined money of those 2 and they buy another buy and hold. So now they have 2 buy and holds, and they do the flip thing again, and let's just say they have 4 buy and holds. So when you get to about somewhere between 4 and 6 buy and holds, okay, and they're all cash flowing good, a super strategy is to take the cash flow, and that's assuming that you don't need the cash flow to live. So this is where the flips come in again.
Yep.
You're generating enough income to put food on the table and pay your bills and everything, okay?
Yep.
So you take, let's just say that let's be real conservative. Let's say the monthly cash flow on 6 rental properties was $100 a month. Now, it's going to be more than that.
Yep.
Let's just say that. Okay.
Super conservative, I would say.
Super conservative.
Yeah.
So that's $600 a month. So what do you do with the 600? Pick one property and take the 600 every month and pay the mortgage down by the 600.
Yeah.
Okay? Just keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Keep doing that. That mortgage comes down very, very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? You could even, if you have very successful flips, put the flip portion of the flip money to it. Okay? But the idea is to get that completely paid off.
Yeah.
So now instead of having a $100 cash flow, it might be $2,000 cash flow
Yeah.
without the debt service.
Yeah, debt service is probably the number one expense for every property.
So now you have what, $2,500 a month of cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
Take that,
Shift it over.
shift it to property number 2, pay that off,
Yeah.
and it's a magic pill.
I do think people fall in love with the idea of like, I want to have 1,000 units. But in reality, if you can have no loans on a handful of properties, that's fantastic.
It's even, you're right, and
Yeah.
it's even more important today because, when, the days of employees staying with one company and staying long enough to have a substantial pension,
Mm-hmm.
I won't say they're over, but
Well, the dollar isn't worth what it was too,
Ye-
especially recently. So
exactly.
yeah.
So that you can't really, young people today can't really count on a pension, and so, nor do they necessarily want to stay with a company and be a W-9 guy or what is it, W-9?
Yeah.
Yeah, W-9.
W-2.
W-2, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but that, when I was younger, that was the name of the game. You went to school, you got a job. You stayed there as long,
Yep.
as long as things went well, and you got a pension. With most people not having a pension today, then you need to generate one, and there's where the buy and holds come in.
Yeah. And for anyone interested in getting into real estate as an agent, I've been telling the new guys that where, you don't really necessarily have a retirement, but your retirement is your knowledge gained in the real estate industry.
Yes.
To, maybe get those buy and holds for that quote unquote pension when
Right.
you do want to retire.
Absolutely.
Which I think is, for me, it's like my business. My business is almost, in my mind, my retirement. I'm reinvesting back into my business.
Right.
And keeping in mind exit strategies for that if I do want to sell a brokerage even,
Yes. Yeah.
So that's what I'm going through right now is
No, it's
weighing the business versus other forms of retirement, I guess. But
right, and it could be do both.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you invest in any other, obviously it's good to diversify your income and diversify your retirement. Real estate definitely has its individual industries, so you can even diversify pretty good with real estate alone, I think.
Yes, you can.
But do you kind of invest into like the stock market, say, or any other sort of different industries altogether?
And again, this is dependent on and less prevalent today than it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
But 401ks came along with the W-2 employee type of thing.
Yep.
And I was fortunate enough to work for a company that had that matched the contributions,
Mm-hmm.
and so you could over time build up a fairly good nest egg, and usually the company employed an investment firm to invest that money.
Mm-hmm.
And you had choices. You could select, investment choices that would meet your risk tolerance. But that was another, if I'm remembering correctly, we could take up to 15% of our salary into the 401k. The company would match 5%. So it was like getting a 5% raise, you know.
Yeah.
And then that was invested in a, you know, again, depending on your selection, in a number of ways, including stocks.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like pretend that you'd never had that money, just kind of put it aside. But again, that comes with what some people might call a steep price, that you're working for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's a reminder to myself always, is like, be the tortoise, not the hare. You can obviously, I think the younger you are, accept more risk.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if you slow and steady, you know, wins the race pretty much. So,
and you know, there's the other side of the private lending coin, and that's B1.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you have all your properties paid off, you can start lending money out to people too, or take the money out to put it all towards something else if you really want.
And you can, as long as it's not a self-directed IRA, which is a whole nother subject. But you can loan to yourself. So say you have an LLC in your flipping business or your buy and hold business, and you have capital, you know, as an individual, you know, you can lend to yourself, pay yourself back interest. So it's kind of like left pocket, right pocket.
Yeah.
That's very good. I have a private lender that you know, has a deep pockets. Let's just call it what it is. And I only know this because we have to issue him a 1099 INT every year of what total interest that he's made. And there's been years where that number was 6 figures. And all he's doing is having his attorney review the loan documents.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, just borrowing what he already has.
He just gets the check at the closing, you know.
Yeah.
Now with that comes the risk of nasty things happening, like defaults and everything. But you know, it hasn't happened with me, and it never will. And so it's once you establish that relationship and track record, then 9 times out of 10, he's calling me, Dan, you got what's in the pipeline? Yeah. You know, so that's another thing. Being a private lender, I've been one, and it's awfully nice, you know.
Yeah. As long as you can sign off on it, letting everyone else do the hard stuff for the most part, right? Yeah. All right, cool. All right, well,
did we cover everything?
I think more than I had anticipated, so that's awesome.
Seems like when you and I are together and having these conversations, the time just flies.
I know. It's been an hour and a half just.
Has it really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But thank you really for coming in.
My pleasure.
I know I learned a lot, so every time I meet with you, I feel like I'm learning. So. And
vice versa, you know, it's a nice. I think we have a nice relationship together, and we help each other. So. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, you want to pop on the MLS here? Yeah. We can go over this a little bit. Sure. Get these things out of our faces here.